Turks, Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian with you guys. These are trying times. My God, 2020 has been
the worst year. It's amazing.
An epic nightmare. Whether we like it or not, though, we said there'd be revolution in 2020, and here it is. We're living through it, and this is kind of what it looks like. We have a ton of stories for you guys, obviously, from over the weekend, so I want to get to it as quickly as I can. So let me just do a very brief shout out to all of you. We thought this was going to be the first month. We didn't get to our fundraising goal, and we're trying to obviously sustain ourselves and remain strong and independent and healthy. But you guys blew the door off in the last 2-3 days. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. So we went past the goal, and now we're carrying over 30,000. Whenever we go past the goal, we don't set back to zero, we carry over. So we've carried over 30,000 into June. So it's a wonderful start. TYT.com/go. We love you for it. Your endless faith in us is what sustains us and makes this show possible. Thank you. All right, Anna, let's do the news.
I command you to immediately disperse. Everybody move westbound on Santa Clara Street towards City Hall.
Hey, this is funny to them.
There were countless examples of police using excessive force against peaceful protesters over the weekend. In fact, most of the protests, in fact, all of the protests started out peacefully and unfortunately began to unravel as soon as an influx of police presence was shown. And that cop that you just saw was from San Jose. And as you can see from the video, he seemed incredibly eager to use his weapons. But there were far more horrific videos floating around the internet over the weekend, including one video featuring two NYPD SUVs running over a group of protesters in Brooklyn. I want to warn you guys that this video is difficult to watch. It's incredibly graphic, but this is what some protesters were met with over the weekend. Now, I don't know how this is even possible, but reports indicate that no protester was injured, even though you see that video and you see the NYPD SUVs attempting to run them over. Now, the response from Mayor Bill de Blasio, in my opinion, was not the correct response, and he has received quite a bit of condemnation as a result. Just a quick clip of what he had to say.
Us have seen the video involving two NYPD vehicles and a crowd of protesters. I didn't like what I saw one bit. I did not want to ever see something like that. I don't want to ever see it again. And clearly, we need to do a full investigation and look at the actions of those officers and see what was done and why it was done and what could be done differently. But I also want to emphasize that situation was created by a group of protesters blocking and surrounding a police vehicle.
So, Cenk, I want to get your thoughts, because when you look at that video, you do see the protesters creating a barricade. And I mean, you have protesters creating a barricade that doesn't give the cops the right to run them over. But that's what they did. And luckily, no one was hurt, allegedly. But I wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah, so that was Bill de Blasio actually fixing the original statements. The original statement was worse, seemed to justify the cops much more thoroughly. That's him walking it back to some degree. And look, I think there are some easy answers and then the difficult answers. The easy answers are don't run over protesters with your car. That's obvious. Police have called cars deadly weapons in the past when they're charging civilians. They will charge them with murder for that. So the same rules should apply to the police, and they should be extraordinarily careful, and they are not. And certainly we're not in that video. Also, don't surround police cars and throw things at them. You know, it's easy for folks to say, "Oh, Cenk, we should do that." Okay, but at some point the cops are going to get out, and then we're going to have more violence. So it's a mess right now. What I don't know, and what no one has clarified in either camp, is what are the police supposed to do in a situation like that? I think they're in a difficult position. I know what not to do, which is run over the protesters. But honestly, they're going to have trouble, getting that situation under control. So my best guess, and I'm not, ranked in any police department, is, and hence I have not gone through all their procedures, obviously. But my guess is you call for backup, and you remain as calm and patient as you possibly can, and move people back in an orderly way. So we've got to all keep our nerves about us and not lose our cool.
So there have been so many examples of police who show up and then they escalate the situation. And I think that's the reason why some of these protesters have the kind of reaction to seeing police, the police presence that they do. And, I think a good example of it is a video that we're about to show you. Now, this is out of Atlanta. The officers involved in this video luckily have lost their jobs. 3 others who were involved are now doing desk duty pending an investigation. But just to give you some background before we go to this difficult video to watch, a couple identified as Messiah Young, year-old from leaving a protest in Atlanta's Centennial Olympic Park in their vehicle at the time of their arrest. According to police reports, the situation escalated when Young, who was driving the vehicle, apparently didn't follow the officer's request to move the car from blocking traffic. Now, the scene is chaotic. I wanted to give you that background, that context before going to this video. Again, it's yet another difficult video to watch. Take a look.
Guys, come to our shot, come to our shot, come to our shot. Watch your back hand. Come to our shot.
So you hear them yelling. I mean, you have 2 people in the car. Why? Why did it need to escalate to that point? Luckily, there were some consequences already for some of the police officers involved in this. Investigators Mark Gardner and Ivory Streeter, who were both members of the department's fugitive unit, were terminated from the police force. A spokesperson for the Atlanta Police Department told Insider. Streeter worked with Atlanta police since 2003, Gardner since 1997. Here are their images. Now, the investigators Carlos Smith and Willie Sauls and Sergeant Lonnie Hood have been placed on administrative duty, an Atlanta Police Department spokesperson later said. So that incident is being investigated, but just meeting protesters with that type of force, with that type of brutality doesn't make sense because it's going to further escalate the situation. And that's what we've seen over and over and over again over the weekend. So there's yet another example. Let me give you one more, Cenk. So there's also video of the National Guard and Minneapolis police basically shooting people on their private property, on their porches, as they were basically riding through residential areas. So what they're using here are paint canisters, or what they're shooting are paint canisters. This was a video that went viral on Twitter over the weekend. Let's take a quick look at that.
Look at this. They just keep coming.
Oh, go inside! Get inside! Get inside! Get inside! Get in your house now! Let's go! Light him up! Go inside now! Get in the house!
Get in, get in, get in, get in, get in, get in. Get in.
So why is the National Guard and Minneapolis police shooting at people who are simply on their private property, watching what's going on from their front porch? It's absolutely disgusting, unnecessary. I mean, these are people who are supposed to work for us, right? They're paid by taxpayers to keep the peace. But as you see in case after case, they escalate tensions, they escalate the violence, and it's not making the situation any better. And all you see on cable news, sometimes they do cover, what the whole point of the protests are, but the worst is local news. They focus on the looting, they focus on the rioting. The best way to, have a peaceful situation is to not allow police to escalate the situation and use excessive force in response to these protesters. But that unfortunately isn't what we saw over the weekend.
I actually think that some of that footage, it makes a great case for the right way of doing things, which is civil disobedience. And if the protesters use force or the looting breaks out, it allows for television to smear the whole movement and is counterproductive. On the other hand, if you're sitting in your car and the cops break your window and tase you in the car, it's obvious they're the ones at fault, and hence they got fired in Atlanta. And so that's way, way more effective. And so I don't even know if those two in Atlanta were doing civil disobedience, but if they were, I think they handled it fairly well. And so, look, honestly, in a lot of ways, television is a cancer. So what do they focus on? Fires and looting nonstop. I don't know how it is in your area, but in LA, and I'd be surprised if it was different where you are, they're obsessed with that. And so almost no context at all as to why the protests are happening. Yes, everybody knows George Floyd was killed, but they don't talk about the dozens of African-American men who were killed unarmed. And it makes it seem like, oh, these people are protesting because of, as one reporter in LA said, one cop did something wrong to one person, which is outrageous way of looking at it. I mean, every day I still get surprised, and you're right to call me naive for it, even after all this, and even after we accurately assess what the problem is on local news, cable news, etc. But I am still stunned by how shallow the news reporters are. The minute they have to talk without a prompter, they're toast. They don't know anything. I don't know that 3 local news reporters in the country could tell you who Tamir Rice is. I mean, they give no context at all. So what do? They do riot porn, looting porn, fire porn. And so when they do that, it not only then doesn't explain why there's such anger and justifiable frustration, but it makes it seem like, oh, they're doing this for fun and to steal stuff and to burn things down. And man, for the protesters, that's counterproductive. And yes, I mean, the problem is that mainstream media will just almost never give the movement and the community its due. And they're just not good at their job. To be fair to them, we think their job is giving you the news, and maybe we're wrong. And maybe their job is to enforce compliance and complacency and get you to buy the junk during the commercial breaks. So
I mean, their objective is entertainment. There's no question about it. It's the whole "if it bleeds, it leads" mentality. Anything that's sensationalistic, anything. I mean, I was watching local news, like a local Fox affiliate last night, and the only thing that they were willing to cut away from looting coverage was a high-speed chase, right? It's all of the, nonsensical, unimportant, sensationalistic stuff. And look, this is the kind of stuff that I think they need to talk about. There's one more video I want to show you, and it features a child in Seattle who was pepper sprayed by cops. Take a look. So that was after the child was pepper sprayed, and you see other protesters surrounding the child and using milk to help out. But when you're indiscriminately pepper spraying people and meeting them with this type of brutality, it's just not, first of all, it's not the humane way to do things, right? It's immoral. But if the goal is to calm, the violence down, this ain't the way to do it. And it goes back to something that you mention all the time, Cenk. There are police officials and cops who care way more about being respected. Their egos matter way more than doing the right thing. They're supposed to be the professionals here. They're supposed to be the ones with the training to de-escalate the situation. And there were just far too many examples of them doing the exact opposite during these protests.
Yeah.
I mean, look at this guy. Look at this guy. Come on.
He can't wait. He can't wait. We showed you a video of a police car indiscriminately pepper spraying a peaceful crowd on Friday. There's thousands of these videos. There's a video of a protester's mask gets pulled down by the cop, and he pepper sprays him right in the face, and on and on. And so, look, even if 15% of cops are overly aggressive, that'll affect a huge percentage of the protesters. And then that side gets agitated, and we get into a vicious cycle of violence. So, but in this country, the reason why we're having all these protests and the underlying cancer of police brutality is because we teach them excessive force. We tell them to take control of a situation and use overwhelming force. Anyone who tells you otherwise it's just not true. That we don't teach effective de-escalation in this country, and that is not the culture of police. Anyone who tells you otherwise, totally and utterly lying. The culture of police is you show them who's boss, and if anyone disrespects you, either arrest them, make up a reason. Number one made up reason is resisting arrest when there is no other crime. In other words, we weren't arresting you, but you said something we didn't like that was insulting to us, so we kicked the crap out of you and then arrested you for resisting our arrest as we were kicking the crap out of you. So can anyone in America really say with a straight face, that doesn't happen a million times in this country? Repeatedly, it happens nonstop. So look, I'm frustrated with so many different parts of this, as almost everybody watching is, including, yes, some people looking to agitate from the crowd. But the number one culprit is the establishment absolutely, positively refusing to change anything. Is anyone taking on the police right now saying, I'm sick of their brutality. I'm sick of their culture. Their culture is wrong. No one. What I just said would get you kicked out of any television station. They would immediately cut your mic and remove you from the air. You watch local news, it is cop ass kissing 24/7. No other point of view is allowed. Compliance and complacency. It doesn't mean you should do violence. You shouldn't. It's counterproductive. But if you're frustrated by policing this country, congratulations, you're conscious.
Well, have no fear. When we come back from the break, Obama's got solutions, and we'll share them with you. And I'm being sarcastic, obviously. So we'll be back.
We need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFDR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Cenk and Anna with you guys. Let's go to our members section for comments first. Jared says the protesters did not surround the vehicle. He's talking about the one in New York. The cops could have simply backed up. Remember Sean Bell? They shot him multiple times for driving at cops. The cops claimed that they couldn't see behind them. They were more worried about running people over behind them. Well, that's a funny excuse because you knowingly ran people over in front of you. So anyway, Jared, overall, good point. Jay Hufford says de Blasio is a total failure. He was disastrous on COVID and disastrous on this. I think de Blasio's problem is he's caught in the middle. He critiques the police, but then the police roar back at him, and then he says something good about them, and then he loses the protesters. Unfortunately, in this case, he is really showing weakness, and by weakness, I mean just lead, and have the courage to lead. On the other hand, other folks that wrote in on YouTube Super Chat made a good point. And Twitter, the New York police had his daughter at that point. This is an insane situation. She had gone to the protests and they had taken her, and now she's back with them. But I mean, this country is totally, utterly devolving. Gravity Boy says there are peaceful protests, then some provocateurs burn down or loot a building, and we are all placed under draconian authoritarian rules and curfew. Yet a shooter can shoot up a school full of children or a theater full of moviegoers, and nothing is done. Yeah, I mean, in Vegas, 52 people died in that shooting? No, nothing ever got locked up. There was no curfew, no nothing, right? So I understand it's a little apples and oranges, but it's an interesting point. Thank you for making that. By the way, our members get their comments read first. They make our show possible. So tyt.com/join to become a member. On YouTube, you could hit the join button below, and there are a couple of layers, and hopefully it explains it well for you guys. Let's go to YouTube Super Chat. Christina Pinkston says, Cenk, Anna, why aren't you out on the streets? Well, that's a fair question, and it has a little bit of a depressing answer. So these are tough times. First of all, coronavirus is not over. You still have that, and you still have significant violence in LA, right, from the police and from everyone else. And if you're CNN, you have liability insurance, you have extra security, you have billions of dollars to play with. So it's harder for us to put our people out there without all the protections that they need. So
yeah, we don't have a crew. If we're to go out and cover it, which is what we'd like to do, we're going out by ourselves. And if we're lucky, we might get one camera person. So it was something that I wanted to do today, but there's no security. And if I go out there by myself, I don't know. It's a tough situation. Plus we have one person, doing the job of like multiple people at like a regular news place. At CNN, you have a segment producer for every single little segment. Whereas with the main show, there's no teleprompter. The hosts do their own producing. Like, it's not as easy and clear cut as you guys think. And yeah, security is a problem. So if I go out there and I get hurt, who's going to do the main show? Who's going to produce the main show? Like, it's a lot more complicated, and I wish we had the resources to do it. But I do have some video that, we got from a protest in LA today. It was a peaceful protest. My husband went out there and talked to a few people. We'll show that video later in the show.
Guys, we don't ask for resources for fun and games. So the reason we do is because we're unbelievably under-resourced. Anna makes a good point. It's not just about safety. If we have one person leave, they're usually doing 3 or 4 jobs, and then the whole thing, collapses of its own weight. Anyway, we're doing the best we can. Hopefully we'll do better and better. But thank you for trying to keep us accountable and asking about it. Kevzy said a point that a lot of folks said here. Kevzy247 on YouTube Super Chat. Did you see the whole video where there was a white woman in the car in front of them waving at the camera? And then a lot of other people, Mama Alaska and others, point out those are in the Atlanta situation. And I just want to be clear, those are students and they were trying to get back home. The cops seem to have waved another car forward, yes, with a white woman. And then they targeted this. So when I mentioned civil disobedience, that's not what these two college students were doing anyway. They just got caught in the crossfire. And then, of course, people are wondering why that car, not the other cars. And you saw the officers. The officers are African-American. But, for the right wing, they go, well, that's it. Then it couldn't have been race. No, there's a culture in policing that white people, there's another video where a cop shoves a black woman and then a white woman comes and shoves the cop down. And the cops don't do anything because white people might have power. So be careful. Black people, you could do whatever you want to. Poor people, you could do whatever you want to. And middle class, you could usually do whatever you want. So those are the dynamics that are at play. But thank you guys, for all of you, for chipping in with all this commentary. Last one, these are all super important. We could take the whole hour discussing this. And I was talking about it on our Twitch channel now over the weekend. I did a couple of hours there, twitch.tv/TYT. Last one on Twitter is Dylan T. Tartaro says, I really do love Cenk and know that he means well, but he is dead ass wrong. They won't ever stop. They'll keep killing us. Peaceful protests won't work. Time to fight fire with fire. #revolution. #storm the Bastille. Look, I have history on my side. People have tried violence many times in reaction to oppressive powers. It often does not work. The great majority of the time, those folks get crushed and it leads to more violence. What has worked spectacularly? Martin Luther King, nonviolence. Nelson Mandela and the ANC when they switched to nonviolence. Mahatma Gandhi, nonviolence, freed 1 billion people. So I'm not saying it just because I think it's a moral thing to do. I'm also saying it because I think it's the right strategy. All right, Anna, let's keep going.
While Trump has demonstrated a complete lack of leadership and courage in responding to the civil unrest in the country, which of course is unsurprising, many have wondered, well, where's Obama? Is Obama going to say anything? Is he going to break his silence? And he has, in the form of a post on Facebook, which I want to share with you now. He does choose to emphasize on dealing with this police brutality issue in a nonviolent way. He says the small minority of folks who have resorted to violence in various forms, whether out of genuine anger or mere opportunism, are putting innocent people at risk, compounding the destruction of neighborhoods that are often already short on services and investment and detracting from a larger cause. Let's not excuse violence or rationalize it or participate in it. If we want our criminal justice system and American society at large to operate on a higher ethical code, then we have to model that code ourselves. So he denounces the violence in his post. And then he starts talking a little bit about what the possible solutions can be. So I want to share that with you. He says, I've heard some suggest that the recurrent problem of racial bias in our criminal justice system proves that only protests and direct action can bring about change, and that voting and participation in electoral politics is a waste of time. I couldn't disagree more. The point of protest is to raise public awareness, to put a spotlight on injustice, and to make the powers that be uncomfortable. But eventually, aspirations have to be translated into specific laws and institutional practices. And in a democracy, that only happens when we elect government officials who are responsive to our demands. Now, I want to go to a video featuring Cornel West. He was interviewed by Anderson Cooper. And I think he does a far better job in responding to this type of rhetoric than I ever could. So let's just quickly watch that video and we'll discuss.
You've got a younger generation of all of these different colors and genders and sexual orientations saying, we won't take it any longer. But you know what's sad about it though, brother? At the deepest level? It looks as if the system cannot reform itself. We've tried black faces in high places. Too often our black politicians, professional class, middle class, become too accommodated to the capitalist economy, too accommodated to the militarized nation state, too accommodated to the market-driven culture tied with celebrity status, power, fame, all of that superficial stuff that means so much to so many fellow citizens. And what happens? What happens is we got a neo-fascist gangster in the White House who really doesn't care for the most part.
So I thought that was an interesting statement because he specifically calls out, the tokenism that we see in politics all the time, right? And it doesn't work. This whole notion of, well, we elected a black president, so that's all it takes. But no, that isn't all it takes. Obviously, under the Obama administration, we did story after story after story of police brutality, which led to absolutely no change, which is why we're seeing what we're seeing on the streets right now. People feel that they have nothing left to lose. They feel that they haven't been listened to. You have peaceful protests with Colin Kaepernick, getting condemned by Republicans and Trump supporters in the country. Kaepernick loses his NFL career as a result of speaking up in a peaceful way. And so now people are like, all right, well, if you don't like our peaceful protests, and by the way, I do want to note, most of these protests are peaceful, but some people have engaged in looting and rioting. And it's, you can't win whether you do it peacefully or you do it in a non-peaceful way. You're going to get criticized. At least that's the comment that I'm seeing oftentimes from people who engage in these protests right now.
So I love what Cornel West said. And the tokenism is exactly right. We talk about Fox News uses different minorities for their purposes. They'll bring on black commentators to blame black culture for violence, and they'll bring on Middle Eastern commentators to blame all Muslims for violence, and so it's a tactic we're all familiar with. But the mainstream media and the establishment does it as well. But the tokenism that they do is that they bring folks on from, and it's not just black faces in high places; it's all those faces in high places. And they'll bring on those tokens to tell everybody, don't worry, go back to your couch. Everything's going to be okay. Don't change a thing. Nothing will fundamentally change. Just go back home and don't do anything. That's the propaganda of the mainstream. That's the propaganda of the establishment. And it's actually more subtle, more sophisticated, and has generally worked better for the purpose of the status quo than even what Fox News has done. So Cornel West 100% right. Now, I read Obama's statement. You take it outside of context and just by itself, you say, look, it's a pretty good statement. He's right. Obviously violence is not the right answer here, but we do need fundamental reform, etc. But it's not outside of context. It's inside the context that Barack Obama was president for 8 years. And what did he do? At best, incrementalism. Don't get it wrong. It's not true that he didn't do anything. He had the Justice Department go to different police offices that were totally out of control. Missouri was a good example, St. Louis, Ferguson, etc. And they try to reform those police departments. Trump has rolled all of that back. But really, in the scope of the massive iceberg of a problem that we have, the change he did was not systemic. I don't want to go as far as calling it cosmetic, but it was incremental. It was small. And why? Because the system would have yelled at Barack Obama if he had done more. And he's part of that system. I'm not trying to absolve him at all, not 1%. And so same thing with drugs. Marijuana possession has put millions of Americans behind bars, has taken away the lives and liberties of so many people, especially minorities in this country. Obama wouldn't even remove it from a Schedule I drug. So don't come tell us now about, oh my God, I guess we got to reform the system. You had 8 years when you were the most powerful man on earth to reform the system, to help African Americans, to help the community, to stop the police abuse. And honestly, Obama, as a representative of the establishment, failed to do that. They didn't have the courage to do it, or maybe the inclination to do it. But either way, it didn't get done. And now things have, as we unfortunately predicted, have boiled over, and there are pitchforks in the streets. So now you tut those folks, and I get it. And again, it's a measured approach, but Obama's measured approach is how this system steamrolled us in the first place.
Yeah, and also, look, I get the focus on what Obama did directly, like for police reform, but also think about the consequences of other policies that were implemented by the Obama administration. The Obama administration expanded on Bush-era foreign policy, including expanding the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. That meant, a surplus of military weaponry. Okay, and where did that military weaponry go? It went to our police departments. Our police departments are overwhelmingly militarized, and they can't wait to use those weapons. I mean, the freaking tanks that they have, the drones that they have, the weapons that they have a direct correlation to the increase, the uptick of police brutality that we're experiencing in the country. So when people, look at foreign policy stories and maybe they're bored by it, they don't care, understand that our foreign policy decisions have a direct impact on policing here in the United States as well, right? Because those weapons need to go somewhere. This whole military industrial complex doesn't just impact other countries, right? It impacts us because we have that surplus of weaponry, which then gets passed off to our police departments, and then they use it against us. It's what we're seeing in these protests right now.
In the video we showed you earlier, where they fire the paint pellets at people on their own porches, before that, this giant military vehicle was roaming through those same streets. Our police now look like stormtroopers. When one of them took off his helmet in Flint, Michigan, that story went viral everywhere because they were like, oh my God, there's humans inside. It was almost like Finn taking off his stormtrooper helmet in Star Wars. And look, let me be even clearer. Obama is definitely at fault. He did not challenge the assumptions of the system. When he was president, he aimed for, and at best, sometimes got, small incremental change. He believed in his core that was the best we could do. He was fundamentally wrong about that, and he let us down. At the same time, it doesn't mean he equals Trump. He's 1,000 times better than Trump. Trump is a maniac, neo-fascist, as Cornel West pointed out. Obama, when you see him compared to Trump, looks amazing. He's an intelligent person who can at least fake empathy and maybe has some empathy. But at the end of the day, did he do any structural change so this time bomb wouldn't go off? No. And it's not just about the time bomb. And that's what people are worried about now because, oh my God, there's unrest in the streets and it might affect me. But it was also not fixing the core of it, which was crushing African Americans more than anyone else in this country. He should have done more. And you can say, oh, it's easy to say that. Well, look, man, if you get to be president of the United States for 8 years and you're still trying to find excuses for not doing something, it ain't me, it's you that's the problem.
When we come back from the break, we'll talk about the response from Donald Trump, which has shown what a complete weak coward he really is. And then we have more for you later, including the Lincoln Project going after Donald Trump and his escalation of racial tensions in the country. We'll be right back.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your active ID more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
All right, back on the Young Turks. Tradora writes in the members section, Cenk and Anna, thank you for pointing out that you guys are working hard. I think those who think otherwise just don't watch the show as much, and if that's the case, then let their comments fall on deaf ears. We real fans are here. Thank you for your hard work. Look, I appreciate that. To be fair to the last comment I read in the last segment, I think that they want us to be covering the protests in the streets. It's not an unfair request, and I have a plan for eventually doing that, but it is unfortunately going to take more money, more time, etc. we got to work on that. We'll try to do the best we can for you guys, as much as our budgets and safety and all that will allow. All right. No more trigonometry writes in. Obama loves that tranquilizing drug of gradualism that MLK warned us about. 100% agree. Leon Cooperman's Tears says, Cenk, nonviolence is the way you get real change, but only when there is a threat of an alternative. We need the sticks to make the carrots appealing. We will win with nonviolence, but it will be because of the people willing to put fear into the equation. So that's an interesting point. I'm not sanctioning that point. All I'm saying is what is hard to argue with is that if this were not happening, would we even contemplate change? And the answer is super obvious. No way. This system will not change unless it absolutely positively must. Otherwise, it'll, oppress us for the rest of time. Last one, there's too many of these, but it's Nicolette here in the member section. Represents what a lot of people wrote on YouTube, Super Chat, and Twitter as well. She says, I was so enraged when I heard a local newscaster say that things would change if all those people in the streets voted, without saying anything about the systemic voter suppression and the apathy that keeps people from the political process. We tried playing by their rules, and they spit in our faces. No justice, no peace. I'm sorry, I'm going to read one more that's also very representative. Eclectic Miss Chelania says, electing people is going to solve things. You were president of the United States for 8 years, Barack. Things actually got worse for minorities and the 99% during your presidency overall. You promised hope and change and left us with neither. No one will ever hold you accountable for your role in allowing this human misery to continue. Here, I'll prove his point. After this show is over, I'll tweet what I said on the show here about how Obama is accountable, and I guarantee you that mainstream Democrats, blue checks, and mostly media will rain holy terror on me, and they will say that I'm the biggest monster you could possibly find for criticizing Saint Obama, guaranteed. And that's how there's something wrong in the mainstream media and establishment culture as well. So it's not just police culture that's the problem. All right, Anna, let's keep going.
All right, well, we have a breaking news story that I want to share with you. Earlier, the independent autopsy into the death of George Floyd indicated unequivocally that George Floyd died from homicide due to asphyxiation. It was important for the Floyd family to do an independent autopsy because, unfortunately, the Hennepin County Medical Examiner's preliminary autopsy was super questionable. It indicated that he died from, pretty much everything other than what actually occurred, which was Derek Chauvin, the cop, putting his knee on his neck, and that's what led to his death. It was asphyxiation. Well, now, after the independent autopsy has come out, now we're hearing from the Hennepin County Medical Examiner again, and oh, wow, would you look at this? They're blaming the death on, let me just give you the exact wording. The Hennepin County Medical Examiner released its toxicology findings and say George died from cardiopulmonary arrest, which complicated law enforcement's subdual restraint and neck compression of him. That is critical, but the report also says this is under how the injury occurred, okay? And they claim that he had fentanyl in his system. So yeah. He died of a heart attack. He died because he was intoxicated, pretty much anything, right? The independent autopsy confirmed what we saw with our own eyes. There was a cop who decided to kneel on his neck, okay, and continued to kneel on his neck after he was unresponsive for nearly 3 minutes. And by the way, a fact of this story that I learned today, and it was just heartbreaking, when you watch that George Floyd video, there's a part of it where he's begging for his mother. His mom has passed away. His mom's been gone for 3 years, and he was begging for his mom. It's just like the most heartbreaking part of the story. I mean, of course, his death is the worst part, but like he's begging for his mother who's been dead for 3 years. And like for the Hennepin County Medical Examiner to blame his death on like a heart attack and drugs instead of just calling it what it is. He was murdered by that cop, period. This is just such a disgusting way of handling the autopsy. I can't believe. And oh wow, what a coincidence! Immediately after there's a press conference giving us the details of the independent autopsy, they come out with this crap.
Yeah. So, look, I'm going to get constructive here in a minute. But in terms of the dueling autopsies, either one side is incompetent or lying, because one autopsy says that he did not have pre-existing conditions that contributed to this, and the other side, the county side, says there was. One side says he has no drugs in his system. The other side says there was fentanyl in his system. So somebody got it wrong. Now I guess we're going to have to do a third autopsy. I don't even know if that's allowed. So here's the constructive part. On day one, I told you guys this. I said it in a podcast when we had conservatives and progressives yelling at each other, and almost no one else is talking about this. I wonder if there's anything we can do. Like, nobody in the news is talking about, yes, but how do you fix it? So in this case, one of the ways that you fix it is the minute there's a police involved homicide like this or death like this, you get federal investigation into it. Those guys at the coroner's office work with the cops every single day. The local prosecutors work with the cops every single day. They're often friends. They often go to barbecues with one another. But even if they're not friends, they need to have a professional relationship. You think they're going to have a great professional relationship if they call the cops buddies, one of the cops himself, a murderer? No, they're going to have a toxic relationship. And those cops, you think they're going to be hunky-dory with the prosecutors and the coroners and all those guys? No, you know how the cops are with thin blue line and all that crap. So you need a federal investigation every time. So we're not guessing at which coroner was right and which autopsy was lying and which one wasn't, etc. But that kind of reform is the reform we never, ever, ever get, because the right wing goes, no way, man, we're going to protect the cops under all circumstances. And the Democrats go, okay, oh, cop union, police union, and donors and status quo. Don't worry. We'll talk a good game, but at the end of the day, we won't reform cops at all, because Democrats don't have the courage to reform policing in this country, and the Republicans don't have the inclination. That's why you have conflicting reports like this. So if you tell me to trust a local prosecutor or a local coroner weighing in on local police, my answer is hell no. I don't trust them at all. I think they're all part of the same system, and I think the chance of them flat out lying is significantly high.
So let's talk a little bit about Trump's response. Right now, as we cover this story, Donald Trump is addressing the civil unrest in the country in the White House Rose Garden. So we'll cover that as soon as we have the details. But I will comment on how Trump has handled this so far. He has dealt with the civil unrest by hiding in an underground bunker. There have been protests for several days in front of the White House, and he has been a scared, cowardly little boy. Nothing makes that clearer. He has been nothing more than a pathetic keyboard warrior. His solution has been to stoke tensions and to declare Antifa a terrorist organization, something that he literally can't do because it's not an actual organization. But I'll tell you a little more about what's been going on near the White House. So he decides to call Antifa a terrorist organization. The Associated Press reports that, when it comes to the protests in front of the White House, the abrupt decision by agents underscored the rattled mood inside the White House. This is the decision to hide him in a bunker, where the chants from protesters in Lafayette Park could be heard all weekend, and Secret Service agents and law enforcement officers struggled to contain the crowds. The president and his family have been shaken by the size and venom of the crowds. It was not immediately clear if First Lady Melania Trump and the couple's 14-year-old son Barron joined the president in the bunker. Secret Service protocol would have called for all those under the agency's protection to be in the underground shelter. Trump told his advisors that he worries about his safety. So as he's hiding out, just keep in mind that, there's the civil unrest in the country. There's a complete lack of leadership. And what does Trump typically do? Brett, I'm going to go to the Kayleigh McEnany video next. He decides to get one of his little press actors to cover for him. And so there's been lots of questions about whether Trump is going to do an Oval Office address. And Kayleigh McEnany goes on Fox News to cover for him and make excuses for why he hasn't done so yet. Take a look.
I know many are asking the president to please give an Oval Office address on these riots because our country is just experiencing so much chaos right now. Have there been conversations with him about that? Do you think he'll say yes to that?
The president has addressed this repeatedly. So I looked, and going back to the first day he saw this video, he has addressed the absolutely horrific video of George Floyd. He's routinely addressed, both in his remarks less than 48 hours ago, the issue of law and order in our streets. He's issued several statements. But here's the thing, Ainsley, a national Oval Office address is not going to stop Antifa. What's going to stop Antifa is action. And this president is committed to acting on this. He has several meetings pertaining to that today. And that's his focus right now, is acting and keeping our streets safe.
Yeah, that's actually the opposite of what's happening. So he had a call with the governors where he told them that they were being weak and they needed to take action and they needed to, quote, dominate the protesters. So he's asking the governors to do more violence against the protesters. Several of the governors have come out and said it was totally unhinged and they couldn't believe that instead of calling for unity, he was calling basically for more violence. And so, but to me, just as importantly, what people are not focusing on is he's passing the buck again, just like he did with coronavirus. Oh, me, the national leader, I don't know anything about that. No. The governors handle the protest. The governors handle coronavirus. I'm just a figurehead hiding in a bunker. Hey, bunker boy, you're supposed to be the leader of the free world, let alone actually being president of the United States. And you could tell from his tweets on Friday night. Look, guys, when the Secret Service says we have to move the president to the bunker, that means they are literally worried that the palace is going to be stormed. Okay, I mean, that's the state that America has devolved to under this incredibly weak president, who constantly says, I have no responsibility at all, and hides in his little bunker and then tweets out, no, we're perfectly safe, and we have really bad weapons and vicious dogs, and we can unleash those. I'm really safe. It's so obvious how scared he is. I have never seen a politician in my life so unprepared and overmatched by a moment as Donald Trump. He is our Neville Chamberlain on steroids.
All right, we have a giant post-game show for you. Become a member. Go to tyt.com/join. We have more stories, and you don't want to miss it. See you soon.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk, and I'll see you soon.